everybody, and welcome to another episode of Insufficient Friends. I'm Kevin. She's Nikki.
Hi. And if you are new here, this is a podcast where Kev and I basically sit down and have a coffee talk about any topic that's interesting to us. And if you don't enjoy the topic we've chosen, too bad, because you can submit ideas to us anytime. Kev, how was your week?
It wasn't terrible. It seemed to go by relatively quickly, which is nice. Always nice.
Yeah.
So it's been fine. But yeah, how about yourself?
Well, I'm choosing to ignore the entire week, except for the weekend was good.
Okay.
Because the Chiefs won, and the
Yes.
Chiefs game was fun.
Yes, you went to the Chiefs game.
So
How
that
was
was good.
that? It looked cold.
It was very good. Oh, yeah, it was cold. I was actually getting kind of warm because we were so prepared and bundled up. Um, but it was good. It was really, really fun. The energy is wild.
Oh
Doing the
yeah.
tomahawk chop in person is wild. Seeing a Mahomes to Kelsey touchdown
Mm-hmm.
in person,
Mm-hmm.
best. Taylor was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Caitlin
did you
Clark was there.
could you see Taylor Swift from your seats?
No, because the suites are like under the balcony and we were right above the balcony. It was on
Okay.
the other side. But I saw all the pictures and I saw her and Caitlin.
Yep.
But yeah, it was good. I love it.
Yeah, I watched
It
the
was
game.
fun.
That's, I think, the first full football game I've watched all year because,
Really?
yeah, well, I mean,
Well, most of the time you're sleeping
most of the time I'm
too.
sleeping, so I don't, because they're all on Sundays, so I don't really get a
Yeah.
chance to watch most of them, or at night, so I
Hmm.
don't get a chance to watch most of them. So that was the first full football game I've watched all year, and I was happy with the Chiefs win. So,
Yeah.
because
I'm always happy with the Chiefs
yeah,
win.
happy with the Chiefs win. So,
Now, I don't know how this weekend's gonna go against the Bills,
yeah, they're
but
playing the Bills, so
I'm like cautiously optimistic
yeah,
because anytime
we'll,
we play the Bills, it's tough. So
yeah, it
like
is.
everyone's sharing the stat of like the Chiefs always win in the playoffs against them, and I'm like, stop doing that because you're gonna jinx it. But
Yeah,
who knows?
I mean, it's the Bills have been are good. Like yeah,
Hmm.
it's just you don't ever know because football can always football too is what I like to
Yeah.
say. Football can always football, which means basically
Hmm.
that there's no telling what's going to happen because you can have some random thing happen I mean, look at
Yeah.
last season. Aaron Rodgers got his ankle destroyed within the first 4 plays and didn't play for the rest of the season. Like you can always have
Yeah.
something random happen that you don't ever expect. So
Oh, 100%. And that's with any sport.
yeah,
But
so
yeah, so I'm like cautiously excited.
yeah, I get that. But anyway, Nick, do you have any shout outs for this week?
No, I don't
No?
think so.
Okay, I have one, and
Hmm.
it has to do with you. So don't be too concerned.
Okay.
So the shout out is to your former and my current boss, Sanja.
Oh, yeah.
So she was excited. She told me today that she thought it was fun that we did a Jack the Ripper episode because that popped up on her YouTube page the other day.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
she said she hasn't watched it, but she loves Jack the Ripper. Like she loves the history and stuff of Jack the
Of
Ripper.
course she does.
Of course she does.
Why does that not shock me at
Doesn't shock
all?
you at all. And what I thought was funny about this is she said you had somewhat recently, like kind of reached out to say hi, like just how are you doing is what she said.
Yeah, yeah.
And she said
We
she
like
hadn't.
chatted about how life is going.
Okay, she said she hadn't gotten back to you.
Oh.
So I don't. Maybe she did and doesn't
I
remember.
mean, I don't blame her if she didn't, because I also do that to people all the time. No, she definitely did.
Okay, well, she said she
Yeah.
didn't, and she said the reason that she didn't, which I guess she did, so this isn't true.
We have
is
like paragraphs of text. Oh, you can't see it on my camera. It's like paragraphs.
well, she said she thought about it. She felt bad because she didn't talk to you, and then she was like, "But I don't ever think about it because I see her all the time." Because she's like on the pod. Like, I see her on
On the
YouTube all the
screen.
time. She's on the screen. I'm like, okay, that's not the same thing, but
Well,
sure.
don't feel too bad because we definitely had paragraphs of text, so she's fine.
But I thought that was funny
That's so
anyway.
funny.
Uh, okay. Anyway, this week, folks, our topic that Nick informed you that you did not contribute to is the mob.
Yes. And
Specifically
I
in
am
America, the
very,
mob in America.
yeah, very excited to do this one for a couple reasons. So, um, I remember watching episodes of Growing Up Gotti. So there was always that show that I watched, like John Gotti.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Casey loves Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are always watching that. And like we both quote it a lot, even though like it's definitely not my favorite movie because it scares me. Like I can't, I don't know. Anyway, it gives me anxiety. But it's one of his favorites. And then also I I watch a lot of the Real Housewives show, but the New Jersey one. There's a lot of in and out, like mob ties. So I'll talk about that a little bit later in the episode and kind of how that ties in. But that was kind of the why. I was like, you know what? I don't think we've ever talked about this. And I think about it constantly for whatever reason. So
Is this your
yeah,
Roman Empire mobs?
it is one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm constantly Googling. Like if you look at my Google history, it's probably a lot about like the mafia, the mob, different
Okay.
cultures. Yeah. My FBI agent's probably concerned, but
Yeah.
that's okay. Anything I search for this podcast, my FBI agent's probably concerned anyway.
Probably. Yeah. We we
Yeah, lots
we
of
we're probably on
serial
a
killing
we're
and
probably on a couple lists, but
yeah.
I think I've been on lists for years because I work in the news, so I
Yeah,
search a
so you're always
lot of
looking.
random things sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So before you go into the history, um, one thing I did look up because I wasn't quite sure because all these words are used interchangeably. So mob, mafia, and the gangs, they're all different. But then also the etymology of the word mafia. So I thought this was a little interesting. So mob and mafia are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But the mafia is just like a specific mob, usually Italian, and it just refers to like a really strong family tie.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other mobs that have less emphasis on family or heritage. And then gangs, like people use the word gang too, but that is technically like a different word. Like that's still an organized crime ring, but more loosely organized, not usually like a family.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a local or regional, usually it's like a neighborhood or a region or something like that. So, but this was really interesting to me. Probably not to anyone else, but to me.
You
The
didn't
word mafia,
you didn't give us any topics, so if it's interesting to
exactly,
us,
submit
we're
a
gonna talk
topic.
about it. Yeah.
So I don't know what to tell you, but it was interesting to me. So the word mafia originated in Sicily. Shocking, because I mean, we all know Sicily is like
Mm-hmm.
home of mafia culture.
Yeah.
Um, So the Sicilian noun mafioso or mafioso,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not good at Italian. I'm better at Spanish, and they're kind of close, but I'm probably saying these wrong. But it roughly translates to like swagger or like boldness or bravado.
Okay.
Um, so, but also because Sicily was once an Islamic emirate, mafia is also said to have some Arabic roots as well. So there's a
Didn't know
couple
that.
different Arabic words that also are very similar. So mafi means like exempted, um, specifically relating to like taxes, but like it's also like exempted from other things like
Okay.
prosecution.
Hmm.
And then there's a couple of them, but another one that was interesting was muafa. Again, I don't know if I'm saying these words right, but that is like safety or protection. So it's kind of like a meshing of the two cultures. Like you've got the Arabic culture, the Sicilian culture, and that's where like the mafia, or at least the etymology of the word originated. So I
Interesting.
just like learning about words and like where things come from.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know it had like Arabic ties at all.
Yeah, I didn't either. And that was very, very interesting because I never even thought about how Sicily, I mean, I knew Sicily was
Yeah.
like a long time ago, an Islamic emirate, but I didn't even think about the ties between that and then the culture nowadays.
Yeah, interesting. So I did more into the history. You did like you're talking etymology. I'm looking more at the history specifically in the U.S.
Yeah.
So the mob obviously rose to prominence. Well, not obviously. I figured it was older than this, but it rose to prominence during Prohibition in the
Hmm.
20s, which I mean, that's what a lot of the movies and crap show
Yeah, like I'm
mob.
sure it was around
Yeah,
maybe before then, but that gave it a reason to thrive.
yeah, that's where the Italian like mafia, which is the most common one in the U.S., kind of got its big
Especially in pop culture. Yeah.
kind of growing. Yeah. Um, and this was kind of boosted. Chicago and New York were the two biggest cities, obviously, because they are the two of the biggest cities in the country. This started and was kind of boosted in the late 1800s and early 1900s. A lot of Italians, like farmers, craftsmen, and things, started to come to the U.S. for the economy, for better
Mhm.
opportunities. And a lot of them settled in New York City. Actually, so many that between 1880 and 1890, the number of Italians in New York went from 20,000 to 250,000.
Wow,
So
that's a lot.
it 10 times itself in a decade. More than
Yeah.
10 times itself in the decade. And then and by 1910, so another 20 years later, it had doubled again to 500,000, which was at the time a tenth of the city's population. So 10%, or sorry, yeah, 10% of the city's population was Italian by 1910.
Ton.
So that's how they kind of all got here, and then um, eventually some of them turned to crime and started to bootleg liquor, and that's where it
Mm.
kind of went all crazy. So in the 20s, you had a power struggle between two of the biggest gangs, and you had one of them. Let's see here. How do you do it? Salvatore Maranzano is what I'm going to guess is how you say his name. Uh, Crowned himself basically the leader, and then he was killed within a year, I believe is what it was.
Mm.
Or he's murdered the same year that he crowned himself basically the king of the mob. And the
Oh, yeah. He was the one that was like the boss of all bosses. He had like a fancy name. Hold on, I had it in
Yeah,
my notes
it's
here because I thought it
Capo
was really
di
cool.
Tutti Capi. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the boss of all
Capo
bosses.
de tutti capi.
Yeah, something
I
like
don't
that.
know.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try the Jersey New York accent. I'm not gonna do that.
We all know after my acting debut at our murder mystery dinner, we all know I'm not very good at it.
But anyway,
I think that's a baller name though.
it is the boss of all bosses is pretty much what it translates to in New
Yeah.
York. So he was murdered. Basically, because they didn't like that he kind of took over, and the guy who had him killed created like an organization called the Commission, where they all kind of work together. It's almost like a government for the mob, is what it kind of seems
Yeah.
like. They had representatives from across the nation, like a board of directors, like and 20 different crime families, at least 20 crime families from across the country were just part of this just group. It's just like a government for the
It's
mob,
wild.
which is
Yeah.
just kind of
It's like
interesting.
so organized.
Yeah,
That was one of the things that I didn't read as much in the history as you did, of course, since I did the present day stuff, but that I did read that and it's crazy. That is so organized.
yeah. So New York was eventually split into like five main families. Um, and then a lot of other cities just had one family per city, one organization per city. And the commission kind of set policies for everybody. In the mid 20th century, so the mid 1900s, there was 24 crime families across the U.S., an estimated 5,000 full-fledged members, and thousands of other associates. So you've got I mean, 5,000 people is not a lot, but it's, you know, somewhat of a, I guess,
It's a lot when you're talking about an organized crime network.
yeah. Prohibition was repealed in 1933. The mob started to get into other things like gambling, loan shark, prostitution rings, things like that. And they also started to get into more actual legal businesses like union bosses and kind of things like that. And that's where you get like, what is it? What's his name? Why can't I think of his name? Who was the Teamsters boss that was killed in the 70s that they've never found? Jimmy,
I don't know.
what's his name? Is it Hoffa? Is it Jimmy Hoffa? Is that his name? I can't remember his name at the moment. Why can't
Yeah,
I
Jimmy
remember
Hoffa, former president of the International Brotherhood of
Yeah,
Teamsters.
and he was. I mean, there's a lot of thought that he was killed by the mob and disappeared by the mob
Yeah.
because he hasn't ever been found.
Oh yeah, American Labor Union leader.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and that's where you get that whole thing too. So
Very cool.
So they, kind of started to go away in 1970, and I'm getting into more of I don't hope I don't get into too much what you're talking about, but in 1970,
No, you're fine.
Congress passed the Racketeering, Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, which is the RICO Act,
Hmm.
which helped just keep the mob kept falling from there, like it kind of hurt them, but they were able to stick around. And actually,
Hmm.
what I thought was interesting, and I makes sense, but I never really thought about it, is 9/11 actually helped the mob. And the
Oh,
reason they say that it partly helped the mob is because almost a lot of the money that was going to investigate organized crime before 9/11 all went to terrorism at that point. So it's
yeah.
like, well, we're
Interesting.
we're more worried about terrorism now than we are, organized crime. So that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting, and that said that kind of kind of took, I guess you could say, America's foot off the neck of the mob. Like
Hmm.
they're not as kind of cracking down on them as much. So I thought that was interesting. But
Yeah.
I have
Very
some
interesting.
stuff on Al Capone as well. Do you want that
Yeah.
now, or do you want to
Ooh.
talk about the? Do you want to
Yeah,
talk
let's talk
about the
about
other
Al
stuff?
Capone.
Okay, so
Have you ever been to Alcatraz? Sorry, I'm already
no,
venturing off.
I've never actually been uh, west of Missouri, really. I think I've been a little bit into Kansas, and I've
That's
been
a
to
crime.
Oklahoma and Texas, but I've never been
Hmm.
west. I want to go. I'd like to go see Alcatraz. I want to go to
We'll
Disneyland,
have to go
obviously,
sometime. Oh
um,
yeah, yeah, you
and
have
I've
to go
never
to
been
Disneyland.
there.
But
Um,
yeah, Alcatraz is very, very interesting, and of course they have a lot of history there. And I actually met a guy who was jailed on Alcatraz for a couple of years, and wrote a book and was doing a book signing, and he was very,
Interesting.
very old at this point, so he's
Yeah.
probably passed away now. But he was in money laundering or something similar that went along the lines of organized crime. But anyways, yeah,
Okay.
very interesting.
Um, so Al Capone, one of the most well-known, notorious mobsters ever. Um, he was born in 1899, January of 1899, in New York, in Brooklyn. Um, in 1919, he left New York for Chicago, and for a while worked as an enforcer and a bouncer at a brothel, which is actually where they believe that he caught syphilis, which ended up killing him later in his
Oh,
life.
yeah.
They believe that that's kind of part of that's kind of where he caught that. And then so 1919 he moved to Chicago, like I said, and in 1925 is when he founded and became a co-founder and the boss of the Chicago outfit, which was the mob that he ran in Chicago um, during Prohibition. In 31, he he got arrested and they
Mhm.
they they started to throw the book at him. But they only got him on tax evasion, which is interesting. They didn't get him on like murder or anything else. It's like, okay, well, we'll get you. We'll get you. We're going to put you in jail for a long time, but it's going to be because you didn't pay your taxes.
Yeah, that was always interesting to me too. Um, and they kind of touched on that. There's this book that I read growing up. It's called Al Capone Does My Shirts, and it was about kind of like his time in prison and stuff. And
Hmm.
it's like written as there's a boy who's like the son of a security guard on Alcatraz.
Okay.
And they kind of it's a kid's, young
Yeah.
adult novel or whatever, but they kind of touched on that and they did mention that. I always thought that was like fascinating. Like that's all that you could get him on, but
Yeah.
got him, I guess.
Um, he went originally to prison in Atlanta. Um, at age 33, he was shortly after that he was diagnosed with syphilis and gonorrhea. So, eventually he was moved to what at that point was new Alcatraz, on Alcatraz
Mm.
Island in San Francisco. Um, he was actually apparently a relatively good prisoner and got. I thought this was interesting. He got permitted to play a banjo
Yeah.
in the prison band, which is kind of interesting. But he had a big uh, downward slide. Um, he was released from prison in 1939, partly because of his failing health. He was referred to Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is a famous hospital in Baltimore. Um, but because of his reputation, they wouldn't they wouldn't treat him. So Union Memorial Hospital did, and he actually donated trees to the hospital because of
Mm.
their generosity. So that's interesting. I guess you can.
Yeah.
There's two Japanese weeping cherry trees. It says at Memorial Hospital because of his generosity. So I wonder if those are still there, because that'd be interesting if they
That'd be
are.
interesting to know.
Um,
What was
but
it? Union Memorial?
Union Memorial, yeah, Baltimore's Union Memorial Hospital.
Interesting. I'll try to look it up. But
Yeah,
yeah, Al Capone is a very interesting character for
yeah.
sure.
Um, but anyway, his health continued to decline. In 19, let's see here. In when was it? 1947. He had a stroke. Um, Contracted pneumonia. He suffered cardiac arrest. Looks like the next. Nope, he suffered cardiac arrest a few days after this, and died from heart failure. So his body was taken back to Chicago, um, and he was buried at a cemetery in Chicago. It says in 1950 his remains um, were moved
Hmm.
to a different cemetery in Illinois. So interesting.
Interesting.
He
Um,
has he
I
has
looked up
appeared.
about the
Oh yeah, go for it.
trees.
Mm-hmm.
So this says that one of the trees was removed in 1950 to make room for construction of a new wing of the hospital.
Okay.
The remaining tree still stands.
Hmm.
It did split it in half. There was a large snowstorm and a large branch was lost. But a cutting from that branch, they used cuttings to create offspring. So they call
Oh, that's
those
cool.
the caponets.
I like that.
Um, so yeah, they're still there's one originally still standing, and then there's the offspring
The
of the
offspring. That's
trees.
cool.
That is
Um,
cute.
and as far as pop culture goes, Capone's been in a lot of things. He's been in movies, books, songs, everything. Notably, I found a few that I thought were interesting. Is Robert De Niro played him in the Untouchables,
Mm.
which I don't know if you've ever seen that from 1987. That's a pretty good movie.
Mm.
Um, he was in a episode of The New Adventures of Superman in '94, which I thought was interesting too. He was in the movie The Night at the Museum. Did you see The Night at the Museum?
Yes, I think so. The
Okay.
first one. I think
There's
there's been spin-offs, and I don't think I've seen
there's
those.
one that they do at the Smithsonian that he's in apparently. There's also he was in the HBO series Boardwalk Empire. or he was played in the series Boardwalk Empire, and he was recently in a biopic called Capone in 2020. So
Interesting.
yeah. So anyway, that's Capone, which is, the most notorious. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned John Gotti, and I have.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that later because there's that has a couple other ties and things. But when I was looking up the history, which I got from History.com, so somewhat credible, more credible than our normal sources, probably. It says notorious. It specifically names Al Capone and John Gotti as notorious characters in the mob, which are the only
Mm-hmm.
two that I saw specifically, besides the leaders or whatever. This is like the first paragraph explaining the mob, and it
Yeah.
specifically calls out Al Capone and John Gotti, which is interesting, I thought. So the two probably
Yes.
somewhat most notorious there are. So
Yeah, and I mean, John Gotti's arrest was pretty recent. I mean, I have a mugshot here of him. It's from 1990.
hmm
So, yeah, definitely more present day. But I first heard the Gotti name in a Real Housewives of New Jersey episode because one of the housewives, Teresa, again, I don't know. I watch a lot of Real Housewives, okay? But Teresa visits Victoria Gotti's house, who is his daughter, I believe.
yeah.
I think daughter, not granddaughter. I think daughter. Um, Still very, heavy ties there, and she's still very like respected and like, but respected, like feared member of, the community.
hmm
And a lot of people go to her for advice still. So like we'll get to this later, but we watched an episode of Mob Wives where someone visits her and the Real Housewives they visit. Like for some reason they are still, a heavy presence there. But yeah, very, very interesting how all of this is still
Kind of going
around. So
on. Yeah.
before we talk about the Real Housewives case that I was going to talk about because it just closed or like finished last year. And then before we get into Mob Wives after that, um, one of the things that was always interesting to me was we always think of like Italian culture and like the Italian mafia, Sicilian mafia,
hmm
whatever, when we think of mobs, but there's also so many others. Like there's even like a Jewish mob that, rose to prominence in New York for a while and then
Okay.
eventually kind of interconnected with Italian. But the Irish mob, the Russian mafia, um, and then the Sicilian. The fact that a lot of these are still active blows my mind. So the Irish mob, I didn't do as much reading on these as we did our other topics of the day,
hmm
but they were more active in Boston, Philadelphia, some in New York and Chicago, but a lot in Boston, Philadelphia, which was very, very interesting to me how like the different, obviously it's the regions of where these cultures immigrated and then settled.
Yeah.
But the Irish mob specifically, there's a lot of pop culture around the Irish mob too, but this was really interesting to me. I never knew that they had one of their prominent people, John Connolly, infiltrated the FBI in the 80s,
Okay.
70s and 80s. And so, I
The
mean, there's so
name.
much. If we were going to do an episode on all the mob history in America, we'd never end. But this was
Yeah.
just one fact that was interesting. During the 70s and 80s, the FBI's Boston office was largely infiltrated through corrupt federal agent John Connolly. So he was used as an informant or helped against like a bunch of rivals to the Irish mob and it wasn't revealed until the 90s.
Yeah.
I'm sure they
That
knew
doesn't.
beforehand, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like fully revealed until the 90s, which is just crazy.
Yeah. They
But
don't. They don't like
so
to.
that's
They don't like to let people know when they screw up something or things like that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like I freak out if I like mess up a number in a spreadsheet. And so I can't even imagine like having to cop up to, oh yeah, we let the whole entire FBI office in our town get
Yeah.
infiltrated.
That name sounds familiar, by the way.
It does, and I don't know why.
I don't know.
Um,
Maybe I've heard the story
because he
before, but
didn't. Yeah, he didn't really do anything else. He just had a lot of mob ties, the specific guy, but Connolly sounds familiar.
Hmm.
Anyways, so the Irish mob is still present.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of these the power has declined.
Yeah.
Rico, there's a lot of factors there. Um, that was interesting. The Russian mob. This always comes up on like Law and Order SVU and some of the different shows I watch that aren't like Real Housewives of New Jersey. Um, because they are so good at organized crime, partially also, I'm sure, because Russia still has a lot of its own issues and they deal a lot in like arms and drugs and things that are a little bit different than what the Irish and Italian mobs did.
Yeah.
But the Russian mob is also still active.
The Russian mob, I think, is
And
of the other ones that you've mentioned, is the one that I knew the most or had heard about the
yeah,
most.
yeah. Um, I'd only really heard about it because I think of shows I've watched and things, but this was interesting about the Russian mob to me, and then I'll move on to my most recent case that I read about. So the Russian mafia and Italian mob, they are very similar in structure. So it seemed like the Irish mob had a little bit of a different structure, but Russian and Italian are very, very similar.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, the only thing that was different between the two were the environments they came from. But the like political corruption, the infiltration of different organizations, like it's scarily similar until they kind of diverged and got into like uranium trading and human tra it's wild and fascinating in like the worst way how the Russian mafia has diverged from the others and now it's like human trafficking and arms trades and like really serious stuff
Yeah.
compared to like union bosses and
Yeah.
it's all bad but when you think of like a scale of human atrocities, I mean human trafficking is one of the worst. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just wild. um so this brings me to my most recent case, Real Housewives related. So going back to the five families. So the original five families, um, Maranzano, Profassi, Mangiano, Luciano, Gagliano. Now the names, like they're still around, but they have different names. So Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese. So the Lucchese crime family relates to this case. So in 2015, Dina Manzo, who is and was one of the Real Housewives because she came often on the show at different times.
Okay.
Um, her then boyfriend was attacked in 2015 outside a strip mall in Passaic County in New Jersey. So her ex-husband hired John Perna, who was a made man in
Mm-hmm.
the Lucchese crime family, to carry out the attack. So he was attacked with a slapjack weapon, which I have no idea what that is. I'm not going to Google it. My FBI agent already hates me, so I don't know what it is. Um, but he suffered a lot of injuries, has a permanent facial scar. Um, so there was the whole reason they figured this out. So he was charged in 2020, her ex-husband who hired the guy. Um, John Perna, the mob man, pleaded guilty in 2021. And so they figured this out because here we go. So the Manzo family in Jersey, there's two brothers that own a wedding venue and like they do other things than weddings, but it's an event venue. So they held a free wedding reception for Perna, who was the guy who actually carried out the attack, the made man in the Lucchese crime family. And the people who attended this wedding, there was 300 people there, and almost all of them were from the Lucchese crime family. So that's how they figured out that that was the payment, so to speak, was a free wedding for 300 people. So he was convicted on, they were both, conspiring to do that and everything. But anyway, so the case just concluded in 2024, which is just wild that these things are still happening and on such like a public level too. Like you'd think if you were this public of a figure, you would kind of stay out of the limelight and like not hire a hitman. But anyway, so that was
You
really
would think
interesting
so, but
because this is a lady that I've seen on TV for, 15 years, and then all of a sudden this comes out and or this happens and then the case just concluded. It's just wild. But very interesting.
okay. So
Um,
here, while you're just for a second here, this
uh-huh.
is a slapjack. You see that?
Yeah,
It's
weird.
it says it's a
Painful.
piece. It's a piece of lead, so a flat piece of lead that is wrapped in leather, and it's kind of like a
Oh,
baton, is what it says. So a baton-like
interesting.
weapon that is a piece of lead wrapped in leather. Sometimes it says there's like a ball
Huh.
or another a bar at the end to cause more damage,
Yeah.
but it's basically like a
Weird.
baton.
Yeah. So it's just wild. Like this guy, because he did this, hired, a member of the Lucchese crime family to carry out this hit on, his ex-wife's new boyfriend. Now he like was facing up to 40 years in prison. He didn't get 40 years in prison, but it's like, man, you just risk the entire rest of your life
Yeah,
just to get back at your ex-wife's boyfriend.
yeah.
Like it's just wild. But
They're
anyway, so all suffice it to say, the five families are definitely still active.
yeah.
Maybe not as much as they were before, for sure not as much as they were before, but clearly very still active.
And I think, like, I'm sure there's still things that happen, like you just said. They did a hit on somebody, but I don't. I'm sure one of the things too that probably cut down on the crime is the fact that, like, it's so. They've probably gotten smarter. I'm sure they've gotten smarter just like everybody else.
They've moved a lot into cybercrime too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but police have also gotten a lot smarter at solving like murders and crap.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
cybercrime is now the thing because it's harder to catch people sometimes with that. But you know,
Hmm.
a murder nowadays, like there's so much DNA crap that they can do, and there's so many different things that they can try to figure out to do anymore. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot. It's more difficult to get away with,
Hmm.
but.
Yeah. Speaking of getting away with, so we mentioned John Gotti and Al Capone are like the two most prominent. John Gotti was called like the
The Teflon Don.
Teflon something
The
because he
Teflon
kept
Don.
getting acquittals. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, just crazy. I think that was in the 80s. But
Yes. I will have more information on that in a little bit when we do our fun facts.
okay.
But,
Alrighty.
but before we do that, after you've gotten through this, so
I'm done with my
I've got
Real Housewives case.
before we go to Mob Wives, I have a fun-ish game to do, and what it is we are going to take a minute here to do a mob name generator.
Ooh, okay.
Um, so let's change this. Corn, okay. So I have not done this. I did one, but I just kind of see how it worked. So we've
Hmm.
got this is the Mob Museum, which is in Las Vegas. They have their website and they have a
Oh,
nickname
yes.
generator. So Nick, do you want to start with you or me?
Let's start with you.
Okay, so choose gender, male. Okay, pick a region. Do we just want to do our region that we actually are? So the Midwest, I guess? Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just do
Hmm.
that. Okay. What side are
Midwest
you?
is more like Irish mob nowadays.
Yeah, so it says Kansas
Anyway,
City,
sorry.
St. Louis, Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Detroit is all Midwest. So, what side are you on? I'm on the right side of the law. Try to be on the right side, but we all have our weaknesses, or the law has never done anything good for me. I'm a wise guy through and through. Which one do you think I fall in? Because
I feel like we both fall on the right
I
side.
mean, I feel like that. But are we going to go with that then? Okay, we're going to go with that. What
Yeah.
racket are you involved in? Money laundering, murder, bribery, robbery, casino skimming, bootlegging, who me, and I uphold the law no matter what.
I feel like in another world, you'd be the casino skimming.
You think so?
I don't
Okay.
know.
We'll go with
Yeah.
that. We'll go with that. Okay.
Because I feel like you're intelligent, so you'd be like the one counting cards and doing things like that.
Okay, well, thank you. Um, uh, what
You're welcome.
what's your role in all of this? There's 6 questions, by the way. So, capo, which is my soldiers do what I tell them to. I don't know how to pronounce the next word, but I'm the boss's top advisor. Mob wife, I know what's going on, but I'm not going to get involved. Corrupt politician, what's wrong with accepting a little something if they offer. Clean cop, if someone so much as whispers bribe around me, they're in the slammer. A soldier, I do what is asked of me, and that's all. A boss, everyone listens to me or else. And the last one is, let's just say I know some people who know some people.
I like the last one. I think you'd be the advisor.
The boss's top advisor? Okay.
Yeah.
Consigliere, I guess? I don't know how to pronounce that, but
Consigliere,
yeah,
I
possibly,
think.
yeah. And pick your favorite era: Prohibition, Modern Era, Rat Pack era, Swingin' 60s, or the Disco era. I like the Rat Pack era.
Ooh.
I think the Rat Pack
I
is
was gonna say,
fun.
I bet you're gonna choose Rat Pack.
So, okay. And then put in first and last name. Okay, ready? And generate. I am, consigliere, whatever. My name is Kevin the
Hmm.
Kid Vobble.
Kevin the
Yep,
Kid.
my
I
racket,
like it.
my racket is nothing dirty, just handling the money end of the business.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
that makes sense.
your advisor to the boss and everyone else in the family. They listen to you and respect what you have to say. You give advice when they need, and the rest of the time you handle money and make sure things run smoothly. That sounds like me. Operations, yeah.
100%.
I sound
That's
like an
exactly what I was
operations
gonna
person.
say. You're the operations director, and everyone comes to you for advice. I mean, that's basically you're my operations director for life, so it makes sense.
Okay, Nick, let's try you now. Okay, well,
All
female,
right.
Midwest. So what side are you on? Right side of the law? I try to be on the right side, or law's never done
Try
anything
to be
good
on
for
the
me?
right side.
Try to be on the right side? Not on the right side. Try
Hmm.
to be on the right side.
Is there a difference? Is it just right or left? I would say right side.
Well, no, there's 3. There's I'm on the right side of the law.
Oh,
I try to be on the right side of the law, but we all have our weaknesses, or the law's never done anything good for me. I'm a wise guy through and through.
fully on the right side.
Okay.
Because I get too anxious about lying about anything. I can't
Okay.
even lie about like not eating what's in the fridge. Fridge in the kitchen.
Fridge in the kitchen. Money laundering, murder, bribery, robbery, casino skimming, bootlegging. Who I feel like you're who me. Who me? Who me?
Yeah.
I feel like you're who me.
Basically.
Yeah. Who me? I didn't
Yeah.
do anything. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What's your role in all this? Soldier, boss's advisor, mob wife. I know what's going on, but I'm not getting into it. Corrupt politician, clean cop, soldier, the boss, or you just know some people.
Definitely mob wife. I
Okay.
love the mob wife aesthetic.
Okay. And pick your favorite era: Prohibition, Modern Era, Rat Pack, Swingin' 60s, or the Disco Era.
I'm gonna choose disco because I love the like fur coats and everything, and that my options are based on clothes, so disco.
Okay. And generating Nikki Moneybag Munns. You're the mob wife. Racket.
Absolutely.
Nothing. I don't get involved with my husband's work. You're a woman who knows more than she lets on when it comes to your husband's work. You don't ask a lot of questions, but you're no slouch. You know what kind of business he's in. You play your cards close to the vest and they wait. You play your cards close to the vest, and they underestimate you, but you use that to
Hmm.
your advantage. So there we
Yeah,
go. That's fun.
very true. Behind
Again,
every powerful man is an even more powerful woman.
yeah, this is true. This is true because we're just
I don't know if that's a real saying or if I just made that up,
yeah.
but
I feel like I've heard that before. I don't know. Anyway, themobmuseum.org. You can find this nickname generator, which is fun. Or you can
that
go
was
visit,
fun.
or you can go visit the Mob Museum in Vegas.
Yeah.
That would be fun to do too. I've never been. Did you say you've been there?
I wanted to go. We didn't have time. We went
Okay,
to the Honda Museum that day.
nice. Okay, okay. So that brings us to Mob Wives.
Yes. This all started literally because I love fur coats and like the mob wife aesthetic. And it made a resurgence last year on like TikTok.
Okay.
Everyone was like loving the mob wife aesthetic. So think like um very glamorous, powerful, like very gauche. So shoes, bags, fur coats, leopard, lots of gold jewelry, like
Yeah.
that aesthetic.
Okay.
I love it. I love it.
Okay.
Um, it's like how my aunt dressed in like the 90s and early 2000s
Mm-hmm.
was very like this, and she was like my role model as far as fashion. I could not be more opposite now, but because I'm in like sweatshirts and things. But anyways, so cool. So it made a resurgence last year on TikTok because everyone was like, the clean girl era is out, mob wife era is in.
Okay.
Like we want to be gaudy again. So, anyways, it just made a resurgence. But I had always been interested in like when I watch Goodfellas or Growing Up Gotti or some of the other, shows or movies or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like it's always the women, obviously, because I'm a woman, that I'm drawn to these, characters. But they're so like silent, strong,
Mm-hmm.
they're confident,
Mm-hmm.
they're loud, they're outspoken versus like how I grew up. Like my parents always encouraged, me to speak out and things, but it's not as, out there as like these mob wives get to be and how confident they get to be. So that was always like the part that I gravitated to. Um, but there's also the other end of it, like these women know what their husbands were doing and what was going on and went along with it and profited from it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the sinful side of it that obviously we don't agree with, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean they don't have great coats.
Did
So,
you say
yeah,
you've watched? You say that Casey's favorite movie is
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, which is a really good mob movie, great mob movie.
Hmm.
Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and all them. Um,
Yeah.
have you? I'm gonna guess this is no, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Have you seen The Godfather?
No, I've seen clips, but I have not seen the full movie or any of the others. I also have not seen like The Sopranos. I feel like I have a long list of mob things to watch that I would
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah. The Godfather's a really good movie.
Well, why don't we watch? Did you already watch The Godfather on your
Yes,
movie
I
episodes?
have.
Oh, okay.
I watched The Godfather
Oh.
and The Godfather. Well, I don't remember if I know The Godfather 2 was on here. I don't remember if The Godfather was on here. I think we watched both.
Mm,
I know I watched The Godfather 2 relatively recently. Um,
okay. Well,
but yeah. I mean,
yeah, I have
they're
lots on my
both
watch list,
worth.
but part of like me thinking of the mob wife aesthetic as a more recent topic was also growing up, I had seen episodes of Mob Wives, the
Mhm.
TV show.
Yeah.
So like I sent you a clip to watch of Big Ange and
Yep.
Victoria Gotti was
Mhm.
the one that I sent you to watch. So it's just fascinating, like how these women live and how they're still, you know, respected, feared. Like there's that fine line, but
Mhm.
it's just such a fascinating cultural phenomenon to me,
Yeah. So
and
I
I like reading
watched
about it.
a 4-minute clip of this, which
Hmm.
was probably about enough for me. Um, but I did notice a couple things that I thought were interesting. Two things in
Okay.
particular. One, the Gotti's daughter, Victoria, which I was not expecting to see a, a family member of John Gotti in this. But she makes the comment that people nowadays don't have ethics or morals, which I thought was
Yes,
wild for somebody in the mob to say.
I know. I That's why I chose that clip because I was
Like,
like, Kevin's gonna hear
what?
that. Yeah.
Okay, that's a
Yep.
way to put it. That's one way to put
Hmm.
it, sure. Um, and then
Yeah.
the other thing that I thought is that um, she seems almost like she is taken over, like she is now the Don, which
Hmm.
would have been back in the day. Like she is, and maybe she is for like the wives. I don't know. I don't know if they really have dons anymore. I don't
Yeah,
know if you have
she's
like one
not.
leader,
Well, they did.
but
I already closed out of the tab, but they do have like acting leaders at the five families still.
mhm.
And she's not in the crime family that John Gotti was in. But I think just because of his reputation and how present she was for all of it, she's just so like such a big name in it still.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
because Gotti was part of the Gambino family, so the leader of the
Yeah.
Gambino family. But if you don't have anything else, I think that's time for facts.
Hmm.
Because my fun fact has to do with him, with John Gotti. So anyway, I have a couple stories about John Gotti, and there's a
Okay.
reason for this. So we'll start with like who John Gotti was, if you don't know. John Gotti was the leader of the Gambino crime family in New York City, one of the five families of New York City. He he became known as the Dapper Don for his expensive like outfits and his outspoken personality and talking like he would talk to the press like he would just he was very vocal. He was very well
Charismatic.
very charismatic. That's a great way to put it. Very charismatic. He was also known as the Teflon Don because there were several high profile trials in the 80s and he got acquitted in all of them. Now later they figured out that there was a lot of witness tampering and things like that. So there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that made that
Naturally.
happen, which makes sense. Jury tampering, misconduct, and intimidation. But that's what ended up happening. They apparently I thought this was interesting too. They estimated he was making between $5 and $20 million a year in the 80s, which is a lot of money in
Lot.
the 80s.
Hmm.
So anyway, in 1991, one of Gotti's underbosses, Sammy the Bull, turned state's witness for the FBI and helped get Gotti convicted of several murders. So he was convicted of 5 murders: racketeering, obstruction, tax evasion, illegal gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. So he was convicted on a bunch of different counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. And he went to prison in Illinois. So in '98, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Springfield area. Okay.
Hmm.
In '98, he was moved to the medical prison in Springfield. There's a big federal medical prison in the middle of town. Like it just sits on the corner of 2 busy streets. And it's just this big old building. It's very nice looking, very pretty building. And it just sits there. And it's got a big fence when you get up close to it, but around the outside, it's just kind of this big open plot of land. And there's a park right next to it. And like
Wow.
the botanical gardens of this town are right next to it. And then there's just like apartment complexes and like a school building and just like everything. It's just like in the middle of town, which is hilarious. But anyway, he was transferred to that prison when he was diagnosed with throat cancer. So he moved to that prison and he stayed in Springfield for a while. He had surgery to remove the cancer, to remove a tumor. A couple years later, it came back, so he was transferred back to prison, back to Springfield again. And he ended up dying in Springfield in 2002 at the age of 61. Mm. Now, while he was in Springfield, he was sent to both the hospitals. There's 2 main hospitals in Springfield. At some point or another, he was sent to both of them. My uncle worked at one of those hospitals when he was there.
Wow, interesting.
And he worked as if I remember correctly, he worked in the radiology department as like a bookkeeper type person. Mm. And if I remember correctly, because it's been a while since we've talked about this, he told me they closed off the entire floor. So nobody else was allowed on the floor that John Gotti was on. and like they didn't move him. So when they had to do X-rays and things, they took the machine. They had portable X-ray machines, and they would take them up to him. They hardly moved him at all if they didn't have to. And there was like very strict rules on what you could and couldn't do. Like you weren't supposed to talk to him. You weren't, like there's, and as soon as you got off from like, he didn't go up there because he wasn't a tech, but he said that they said if you once you got off the elevator, there's like guards everywhere. And so John Gotti was in Springfield and died not, 10 minutes from where I lived at some point in my life.
I did not know that. That's very interesting.
My teacher in high school told us this story too, because this would have been after he had died in 2002. But my teacher said that he was visiting his mom at one of those hospitals, at the other hospital, not the one that my uncle was working at, but at the other hospital. He was visiting his mom, and he said he was on the elevator, and a bunch of guys, big guys in black suits, all of a sudden come onto the elevator and get on and ride up a couple floors with him. He said they were really nice. He talked to him for a couple minutes. They were really nice. They got off the elevator, and he went up to see his mom. He said a couple days later, he's watching the news, and the big guy that was the main one in the front was on the news because it was John Gotti's son, and he was talking about his dad just dying.
Wow. That's
which
wild.
I thought was really interesting. So there was, I don't really remember it because I didn't really pay attention. My dad said that for a while, there was a noticeable like presence of the mob in Springfield because obviously John Gotti was there. He was the leader of the Gambino crime family. So this is a big high profile person in the mob that just happened to be in prison in the town that I was in because Springfield has one of the top medical prisons in the country. That's a federal prison. So that's my fun fact.
Like why Springfield?
It's just I don't know why Springfield has the medical ones there. It's just where it is. I don't know anything else about it, but I just thought that was an interesting fun fact that I could pull into this, which is kind of like a personal family-ish related story, which is fun. So anyway, Nick, what's your fun fact for this week?
So mine has to do with one of the 5 families, the Genovese family, which originally they were the Luciano family. Okay. Lucky Luciano, he's the one that started it, but now it's the Genovese family. Okay. So in the 1960s, the Stonewall Inn, so because the being gay was illegal at the time, so all the bars were underground. Under the guise of state liquor laws barring the serving of alcohol on disorderly premises, the New York Police Department regularly raided bars that catered to gay patrons. The Genovese crime family, purchased the Stonewall Inn, which is very famous, in 1966 and transformed it into a gay bar and nightclub. The reason they got away with this was family member Fat Tony paid New York's 6th Precinct approximately $1,200 a week to look the other way. So I don't know how much $1,200 a week is, in 1960 money versus now, but it's probably a good amount. So, the Stonewall Inn, which is famous if you love the girls and the gays like me, you know what the Stonewall Inn is, and it was part of the Mafia scene. Yeah. Are you looking up how much $1,200 a week is now?
I'm trying to look up how much that is.
This says it was 1966.
It says it's about a little under $13,000.
So that's a lot to be paying a police precinct each week.
Yeah, a week.
Yeah, a week.
That's a somewhat of a chunk of money. Yeah. Interesting.
So.
Fun. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, Nick, that's it for this week, isn't it?
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a lot of fun. We hope you guys had fun as well. If not, again, you can
tell us what to talk about. If not,
tell us what you want us to talk about. You can do that by commenting below or wherever you listen to your podcast. But don't forget to like and subscribe as well. If we like what you guys suggest, we'll look into it. I mean, we'll probably do it because we'll run out of ideas.
Yeah, we'll probably do it either way.
Yeah, we'll probably do it either way. But yeah, just let us know because we enjoy. We're trying to have fun, so whatever you guys want to hear too, we'll have fun with it. But don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye.